the people are playing a game they've already lost because they are playing with the wrong equipment. You have been told that hard work is the path to wealth. That's a lie designed to keep the gears of the economy turning on your sweat. If labor alone created riches, the man swinging the hammer for 12 hours a day would be the king of the mountain, but he isn't. He's tired and he's broke. The first 100,000 is the hardest money you will ever earn. Not because the government is greedy, or your boss is a tyrant, or the system is rigged. It is hard because you have no leverage. Without capital, you are nothing but a biological engine. You are a hamster on a rusted wheel, sprinting toward a horizon that never gets closer. You are trading a non-renewable resource, your time, for a flat taxable wage that evaporates the moment it hits your palm. You've seen the charts, those beautiful sloping lines of compound interest that promise $1,000,000 if you just save your pennies. But here is the cold surgical truth. Compound interest is a ghost if you have nothing to compound. 0 times 10% is still 0. You are fantasizing about the snowball, but you refuse to admit that you are currently standing in a desert with no snow. Everyone wants the magic of the later years. No one wants the friction of the early ones. When I was young, I didn't dream of billions. I obsessed over the first few thousands. Why? Because I knew that until I crossed that line, I wasn't an investor. I was a beast of burden. When you are broke, the world is expensive. Your car breaks down. Your child needs braces. Your roof leaks. Being poor is a war of attrition where the environment itself is trying to bleed you dry. Every dollar you save feels like a pint of blood. But there is a line, an invisible psychological border at 100,000. Once you cross it, the physics of your life change. 10% on $1,000 is a rounding error. It's a cheap dinner. 10% on 100,000, that is $10,000. That is more than some people save in 3 years of back-breaking labor. That is the moment the money starts pulling its own weight. Until then, you are working for the money. Afterward, the money begins its shift. If you aren't willing to be stubborn, to be bored, and to be cheap for as long as it takes to pile up that first mountain of capital, then stop watching now. You aren't an investor. You're just a consumer with a hobby. The market has a cruel way of testing your resolve before it grants you entry into the upper echelons. In the beginning, the numbers are offensive. Imagine this. You spend an entire year sacrificing. You skip the vacations. You drive the car with the peeling paint. You eat the same monotonous meals. You manage to save $25,000. You invested. At the end of the year, the market gives you a 10% return. You look at your account and you see $2,500. That is the great filter. Most people look at that $2,500 and feel insulted. They think, I gave up my life for this. I could have had a new motorcycle. I could have gone to Europe. They see a measly return and conclude that the game isn't worth the candle. They strangle the golden goose while it's still an egg. This is where wealth is actually forged, not in the big wins, but in the psychological endurance of the boring years. These years are the toll you pay to reach the magic. You cannot hack them. You cannot skip them. The numbers do not double faster just because you are impatient. I have seen brilliant men doctors, lawyers, executives fail this test for 40 years straight. They earn 6 figures, but they live like royalty. They buy the German car the moment they get the bonus. They move into the house with more rooms than they have people. They call this rewarding themselves. I call it self-inflicted poverty. Wealth is not what you spend. Wealth is the gap between your ego and your income. If you increase your lifestyle every time you increase your earnings, you're just a high-paid slave. You're building a bigger cage, but you are still in the cage. I lived through the Great Depression. I saw men in tailored suits who had nothing in the bank but a pile of debt and a fading reputation. You learn very quickly that appearances do not compound. Savings compound. The world will try to shame you into spending. Your neighbors will judge your old car. Your friends will wonder why you aren't at the expensive dinner. Let them. While they are busy projecting an image of success, you are building the reality of it. You are stacking soldiers. Every dollar you save is a soldier that will fight for you 24 hours a day without ever asking for a raise or a day off. If you cannot control the impulse to consume, you will never have the discipline to invest. The first 100,000 isn't a financial goal. It's a character test. It's the universe asking, do you have the stomach to be bored until you are rich? Most people answer no with their credit cards every single weekend. They stay broke not because they don't earn enough, but because they can't stop leaking capital. Stop leaking. Start stacking. There is a moment in the accumulation of wealth that feels almost paranormal. It is the day your capital earns more than you do. Up until this point, you have been the primary engine. You were the one dragging the stones up the pyramid, gasping for air, sacrificing your sleep for a paycheck. Every dollar in your account was a direct result of your physical or mental exhaustion. But then, quietly, the math shifts. You wake up, you check the ledger, and you realize that while you were sleeping, your investments produced more value than you could save in an entire year of labor. This is the birth of the capitalist. Most people never experience this because they view money as a tool for consumption. To the wealthy, money is an employee. And let's be honest, money is a much better employee than you are. It doesn't get sick. It doesn't need a pension. It doesn't get distracted by office politics or burned out by a long commute. It just sits there in the cold silence of the market, multiplying. When you have $100,000 invested at a 10% return, you are generating nearly $1,000 every single month without lifting a finger. Compare that to the man who is still broke. To save an extra $1,000 a month, he has to work a second job, miss his children's birthdays, and ruin his health. You are getting the same result by simply existing. That is what leverage looks like. It inclines the entire global board in your favor. When you have no capital, every mistake is a catastrophe. If you lose your job, you lose your house. If the market dips, you panic. But when you have that first 100,000, you have a fortress. You can afford to be wrong. You can afford to wait. You can buy when everyone else is selling in a blind panic because you aren't worried about next month's rent. You have staying power. I've seen this change people's eyes. Once you see your capital out-earn your labor, you can never go back to being a happy worker. You realize that the game of status, The fancy watches, the designer clothes, the social approval is a distraction designed to keep you from owning the means of your own liberation. The most expensive thing you can buy is your own freedom. And the price of that freedom is exactly what the first 100,000 buys you. A seat at the table. In this world, the table is where the real money is made. It's where assets are priced, where businesses are bought, and where compound interest does its heavy lifting. Until you have that base capital, you are just a spectator through the window. You are a worker with dreams. But once that money starts compounding, the system finally starts working for you instead of against you. Do not be fooled by the lucky ones. When people see your wealth start to snowball, they will call you fortunate. They will ignore the decade you spent in the trenches. They didn't see the cheap dinners or the generic brands. They didn't see the years where your portfolio rumbled along at zero growth while you kept feeding it anyway. Fortune is just the residue of design. You designed a life that could withstand the boredom, and now the market is rewarding your resistance. Reaching 100,000 is not the finish line. It is the starting gun. And this is where the most dangerous trap of all is laid. The moment a man gets a little bit of money, he starts to think he is a genius. He looks at his six-figure balance and forgets the discipline that built it. He begins to believe that the rules no longer apply to him. He starts chasing alpha. He listens to hot tips. He buys into speculative bubbles because he wants to turn his 100,000 into 1,000,000 by next Tuesday. This is how the market humbles the arrogant. I have seen men spend 15 years building a foundation only to blow it all in 15 minutes of stupidity. They use leverage, the wrong kind. They borrow against their portfolio to buy more, certain that the market only goes up. But the market is a fickle god. It has a way of finding the exact price point that will ruin the most people, and it visits that price point with regularity. 1987, 2000, 2008. These weren't accidents. They were clearance events for the overconfident. Building wealth requires discipline. Keeping wealth requires humility. If you think you are smarter than the market because you hit a milestone, you are already halfway back to zero. The first 100,000 is a proof of concept. It proves that the system works if you stay out of your own way. It is the hardest money because it requires a total overhaul of your psychology. You have to stop being a consumer and start being a producer. If you are still living above your means, I cannot help you. If you are still trying to impress people who don't care about you with money you don't have, no one can help you. You cannot out-earn a lack of discipline. The conclusion is brutal. Get the first 100,000 by any honest means necessary. Cut the cable. Sell the car. Take the extra shift. Live like a monk if you have to. Because until you have capital, you aren't even in the game. You are just a resource for those who do. Once you have it, protect it. Don't let your ego steal your future. Don't reward yourself with liabilities. Reward yourself with more assets. Let the compounding show its teeth. In the later years, the growth becomes so aggressive it will frighten you. But you will never see those years if you don't survive the first 10. The world is full of geniuses who are broke. Don't be a genius. Be a survivor. Avoid the stupid mistakes, debt, envy, and lifestyle inflation, and let time do the rest. Capital is the only thing that works harder than you ever could. Give it a chance to start.